Hello. Thank you for joining me. So, here's the deal. I'm starting my new job, driving out to my life insurance company today, so my schedule is going to be way different, as you know. But we don't need to talk about that. The reason I bring it up is I had said that I was probably, because I have about an hour and a half, 2-hour drive, that I was probably going to just start recording videos in the car instead of doing them live because there's so much lag and, internet connection issues on this drive at times. So I just want to give forewarning that yes, I will be dropping you up here for a minute, and then who knows, as I'm on the interstate, when I'll be dropped. And the reason I probably will just start pre-recording these instead of doing them live, but I like doing them live because I feel like people are watching, and this is just kind of for my regular viewers, I guess. I can understand how someone who's casual wouldn't want to watch a video like this because it's more just the stupid thoughts that I have as I'm driving by myself and things like that. I don't know if you noticed this, but I'm a talkative person, and so I just like talking in the car. It helps keep me awake, helps me get through the drive. And if I'm pre-recording it, which I might try to do more, the other thing is if I pre-record an hour and a half video, it takes forever to upload, so this way, it's kind of just baked into it. So thank you so much for joining. If you're watching this afterwards, I assure you they'll be lagging and things like that. So I apologize for that. If you're watching live, bear with me. I'll probably drop you at spots. But even if no one's watching, I'll keep recording. This drive's really weird, too. Sometimes I just lose you one or two little spots. Other times, it's a struggle the whole way. So we'll see. If it's a struggle the whole way, this will probably be the last time I do it. But understand, because I'm driving out to a new job, I'm not particularly sure what that might look like. So anyways, enough of that. So yeah, let's talk about the news. So I did a 3-minute video yesterday on this New York Times tax return story. Now I'm going to lose you here for a quick second, so I won't get into any more details, but suffice it to say, this is the same old story where we don't get to see sources, and they're trying to make a bombshell out of something just a non-story. Wealthy billionaire businessman takes legal tax loopholes. And I'm sure we could go through every single wealthy politician in Washington and find out that they take loopholes that would average person would be like, wait a minute, that's crazy. Sorry about that. Hopefully that we should be good now. This tax. We were told by Joe Biden, by Barack Obama, by all the people, Yovanovitch, Inman, the president of the Ukraine, Zelensky, is a stand-up guy. He's fighting corruption. His hand-picked prosecutor is currently investigating Joe and Hunter Biden and says they have evidence of alleged bribes and other corruptions that came from them. That's not a story. We know that it was released that there was an investigation that showed that Hunter Biden was paid not only by Ukrainian oligarchs, but Chinese oligarchs. The wife of the mayor of Moscow, $3.5 million. That's not a story right now. We see, as I'll talk about here in a bit, ballasting scheme. Come on, phone. It was a bit ridiculous. But if you can still hear me, we see ballot harvesting scheme that's occurring in Ilhan Omar's district, where we had one of her staunch allies, his brother, through a video admit that he had hundreds of ballots in his car, which the state law says that only 3 are allowed to be harvested at a time, so that would be illegal. I don't know if I'm going to lose you or not. Anyways, I'll just keep going. We'll see. And then that same video had allegations of ripping off old people, taking ballots that old people didn't find out, paying people for their ballots to fill them out, and things like that. That's incredible voter fraud that's occurring in that district. That's not a news story. We have that the Russia collusion hoax. FBI actually knew that the primary subsource of the Steele dossier was, in fact, a threat to national security, an alleged Russian spy, yet they went ahead and took his word anyways to spy on the Trump campaign. We have texts from FBI agents admitting that the entire investigation into Flynn was a sham, and it was basically put forth initially by Barack Obama. That's not a news story. Instead, the news story is because the right is so bad at this. They allow the left to control the narrative in places like the New York Times. The news story is wealthy businessman takes legal, pays few taxes in a legal manner. Now, there's so many things to talk about in this story. First is, we have no proof that it's true. Trump's disputing that what was revealed was accurate, and certainly the New York Times has lied over and over so long that it would be foolish to just trust. I'm not saying that this is inaccurate, but I'm not going to trust it until I see definitive proof. Why would you trust people that lie to you all the time? Their sources have been wrong so much, not just the New York Times, but the entire mainstream media. They've been wrong so much. Why would we trust them now? So Trump's disputing exactly what was said. Second, notice that the story starts off with a chart of how much Trump's paid in taxes in 2016, 2017. Now remember, this was when he was running for and became president. We know that he hasn't taken a salary, so therefore it's quite reasonable that he didn't have income, so he wouldn't be paying the same amount in income taxes that the rest of us would expect for someone who's a billionaire. But my question is, why didn't they release a similar chart with the prior 15 years? Because they claimed that he had access to 15 years. So one of the things that's not, now I don't disagree with the idea that we need to reform our tax code, and that's a discussion I'll get to in a second. But the allegation here seems to be, oh, billionaire only pays $750 in taxes one of these years, proves that he's shady. But the way our tax code works is that once you're a businessman of that amount of wealth, what happens is if you make certain investments or you lose certain amounts of money in a particular year, then you don't have to pay taxes on that money. So it's quite possible that what happened was that Trump basically paid an exorbitant amount of taxes in one year and took losses, so the next 2-3 years paid a small amount of taxes. I don't know. But if the New York Times has 15 years of his tax returns as they're claiming, why have they only released basically 2 years, the simple chart showing it? Is it because some of those years will show that he paid millions of dollars in taxes or hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes? And it seems like that what we should be doing is looking at, my question is, if you're going to have this line of attack, how much in taxes did he pay over 15 years? For example, let's say you look at me and, I'm someone, right now I'm making $0. I'm working based on commission, but, I was making basically $15 an hour. If I'm bringing home $40,000 a year if I work a ton of overtime. Let's say you found out that I basically paid no taxes last year, the year before, the year before, the year before. But the year before that, I paid $30,000 in taxes. What you should be concerned about is, over 5 years, how much in taxes did Rob pay? If I overpaid, and I grant you, this situation's different, but that's when you're talking, Trump's not accused in this New York Times story of doing anything illegal. It's just a moral question. Should a billionaire pay so little in taxes? Well, how much did he pay over that period, total? You could take numbers like these and break them down how you want. Oh, he only paid $5 this year. Yeah, but the year before that he paid $1 million. Well, still, he only paid $5 this year. So the question is, it's clear that they're being duplicitous with the way that they present the information, even though we don't know if it's accurate or not. If they were really concerned, they would have reported all of the information. That is a breakdown of what he paid each year. Secondly, as I said before, what's the crime here? Like, they just want to make it seem like, oh, well, Trump's not the successful businessman that he claimed. He admitted as much. There were stories written in the New York Times while he was running for president in 2016 about Trump bragging to using tax loopholes and declaring bankruptcy. Yeah? And? Are we really going to claim? So let's take, I don't know, a random Democrat, Nancy Pelosi. So are we going to, if we looked at Nancy Pelosi's tax returns, she didn't take tax breaks? And people will say, if I'm playing devil's advocate, Democrats will say, well, yeah, Nancy took tax breaks. Of course, everyone does. But she didn't take as many as Trump. Oh, so then what's the threshold? Are you telling me those people that are out there right now today, that are on the left, like, oh my God, look, I can't believe Trump did this. Are you telling me when you pay your taxes, if you go to your accountant or if you go to H&R Block or whatever, and they say, actually, you went to school this year? Yeah, you actually get a deduction because you went to school. Are you saying, no, thank you, I won't take that deduction? You have a problem with the tax code, not with Trump then. If Trump did nothing illegal and he simply took advantage of the current tax code, I don't understand what the story is. I would expect every single American to take every single tax break that they can. That's my expectation. Some people, the wealthy, because our tax system is so... Sorry, yeah, rational. So yeah, I can understand if you're new being like, I don't want to watch this driving to my new job, so we'll see how the live stream goes. I'm just testing it out today. If it sucks, if it buffers way too much, then probably next time I'll just pre-record. But anyways, finishing up here on this section. I expect everyone to take these legal tax loopholes. And yeah, it sucks that the way the system's worded is so convoluted that the wealthy can find those loopholes better than the average people. But then we should revamp the tax code. We're going to listen to people like Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer that have been in Congress for 30 or more years complain that Donald Trump took advantage of the tax laws that they created? What sense is that? The other thing is that there's a question when you talk about the morality of something. What you want to do is look at people's worldview and what their claims are on other issues to determine whether or not they're being hypocritical. So there might be a claim that Trump is immoral. For example, if Trump's out there saying it's important, everyone needs to pay more, billionaires need to pay more, and yet he's taking advantage of tax loopholes, then you could say, well, even though this isn't illegal, it's hypocrisy. But Trump's not doing that, is he? Trump's suggesting tax breaks. Trump's not saying that it's immoral to be a billionaire or a millionaire. You know who is doing that? The left. People like Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and the progressives in the Democratic Party. Now, we know from, remember Rachel Maddow's, in 2018, Rachel Maddow had an episode, we got our hands on one of Trump's tax returns. Remember this? And it turned out in that particular year, he paid a higher rate than Bernie Sanders. Now, Bernie Sanders is out there telling you, you're a hypocrite if you're not paying your fair share, yet he's taking every loophole he could get. Now, is this illegal on Bernie Sanders' point? No. Do I begrudge Bernie Sanders, who worked for his money, though he didn't really work, but whatever, he got the money, he's entitled to it. Do I begrudge him trying to keep as much of his money as possible? Absolutely not. But he's a hypocrite. Donald Trump is not a hypocrite in this sense. He's flat out told you, of course I take advantage of every loophole I can. Why wouldn't you? That's what businessmen do. We should have a more simplified tax code where these sorts of loopholes aren't available. And this gets to another point that I think I'm the only person you'll hear talking about today. One of the arguments that you hear from the left is we're so immoral and it would allow the largest transfer of wealth in history and yada, 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 and all these wealthy businessmen. Now, we can see that if you look at the actual economic numbers, that actually real wage growth in this country on average during those tax cuts before COVID was growing at about a clip of 4,000 a year, which is incredible. And I think the tax cuts largely had a lot to do with that because it did allow average people to keep more money in their pocket. But we're told, this was allowing businessmen to be incredibly corrupt. Here's the dirty little secret. Why do you think that the billionaire class overwhelmingly is supporting Democrats? If the Democrats were going to revoke the tax cuts and, impose incredible restrictions on the wealthy class, why would the wealthy class overwhelmingly be Democrat? One second. Merging. And the reason's quite simple. Because even under someone like Barack Obama and under Democratic tax codes, the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter what their tax is. The only people that pay the actual tax rate are rubes like me. These business owners are going to find a way to hide their money offshore or accept these legal tax loopholes. And you want to know how this story proves it? Because they're claiming Trump's been doing this for 15 years. Now, wait a minute. If billionaires were able to pay $750 in taxes well before Trump's tax cuts, then how are the tax cuts to blame? What I know is, here's what the tax cuts did for people I know, gave them more money in their pocket. Period. Average working class people. So what the Democrats are really saying in totality here is, we're furious that average working class people paid less taxes. That's what they're upset about. That's what infuriates them about the tax cuts. Because these incredibly wealthy businesses were going to find ways to get out of paying these taxes no matter what, as is proved by this story. So just revoking the tax cuts won't do anything. Now, I will say that I think that people like Bernie Sanders, given their druthers, probably would force corporations to pay more taxes. But they'll screw Bernie out of any sort of power. Even if he became president, clearly he won't, but even if he did, they would never vote to tax their corporate donors more. They'd make it look like it on paper, but they'd leave the loopholes in there. But that was just something that came to my mind. Now, the first thought that came to my mind, and I think, again, I was the first person to say this, as soon as I heard this story, and I've made these claims before, two things popped into my head. One, Julian Assange, and second, this claim, and I'll take the second claim first, this claim from the Democrats of how dangerous and immoral it was for Trump to accept illegal Russian help. This was one of the dumbest talking points that I've heard, and it was repeated by people like Adam Schiff and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and James Comey and all of the media and friends of mine that are on the left. Well, even if Donald Trump didn't collect Russia, he willingly accepted their help when they illegally hacked these emails. We still have no proof that Russia did that. The incompetent and coup-driven FBI and Mueller, they didn't even look at the physical server. We found out that they were wrong about so many other things, that they were lying or misleading, so why would I trust them on this? But let's say it is true for the sake of argument. And what's the implication here? And I said this years ago. I said, so what the Democrats are telling you is, let's say that another country, say China, hacked emails of Donald Trump and released them showing that Trump was involved in all sorts of shady things. Do you really think that Joe Biden or Pelosi or Anderson Cooper or Jake Tapper or people at the New York Times or the Washington Post would say, oh, well, we're not going to cover what this stuff that proves that Donald Trump's incredibly unethical or shady or possibly illegal? We're not going to cover it because it was illegally hacked. We're not going to cover it. Do you really think that's what they would do? I could prove they wouldn't. You want to know how? Because these tax returns of Trump's were illegally leaked, and yet the New York Times and CNN and the Democrats, they're all talking about it. So wait a minute, if it was worth investigating Donald Trump for 4 years because he... I think I might be back. Sorry about that. Like I said, on the interstate, never know. But yeah. If we had to have a 4-year investigation into Trump because he accepted help in the form of documents that were illegal, why wouldn't the same be true of the Democrats? So let's investigate every Democrat, right, that talks about this, or at least even if not an investigation, we could claim they're all immoral. They're encouraging illegal activity by using illegally obtained documents to smear their opponent, right? Isn't that their argument? Now, let me be quite clear. That's not my standard. My standard was, duh, it doesn't matter how dirt comes out. If I'm running for office and someone illegally breaks into my house and obtains documents that show that I robbed a bank, I would not fault the media for reporting on that. I would not fault my opponent for saying, wow, robbed a bank. Now, I would expect them to say it was bad that someone illegally did it, illegally obtained those files, but I would expect them to use those files if they were true. The entire WikiLeaks debacle, no one ever claimed that the emails that were leaked were illegitimate. We know they were legitimate. But we were told, oh, you can't look at them because they were illegally obtained, and this was an illegal smear set to harm a presidential candidate. Okay, where are you now? Doing the exact same thing, as we all knew they would. And this is something that infuriates me about the left. They play this game where they get on their moral high horse and act like they get the vapors like, oh my God, I can't believe Trump would use dirt obtained by Russians. No, everyone with half a brain, even the Democrats, they know that they do the exact same thing. They know it. We all know it. But we all have to pretend this game. And this is something that's so common on the left. Like, we have to pretend that all of these institutions are against Black Lives Matter. No, they're not. We all know that that's garbage. We have to pretend like you're always disadvantaged to be black or a person of color. That's not true. We have to pretend that you're always disadvantaged to be a woman. That's not true. Go to academia. Go to politics. You can see it. In the same breath, they're saying, oh, Hillary Clinton being a woman was disadvantaged. In the same breath, they were saying, we don't like the way Donald Trump shook our hand. You can't attack women like this, blah, 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 blah. Oh, she's a woman. It would break the glass ceiling. The truth is, it's complicated. Sometimes it could be detrimental. Sometimes it could be positive. But we all have to embrace these known lies. We have to embrace the lie that men could have babies. We have to embrace the lie that men are stronger on average than women, could outcompete them in physical sports. All of these lies we just have to accept. We have to accept the lie that, oh, well, the Democrats would never use illegally leaked information to harm their opponents. They would never do that. And everybody knew it was a lie. Everyone. I don't care. I don't blame the Democrats. Now, there should be an investigation. Who leaked these illegally? I think this investigation should be the exact same strength as the Russia investigation into the Russia leaks, right? What's the difference? Basically hacking or illegally obtaining documents that were then pushed to the press in order to smear a presidential candidate. That's exactly why we had to investigate Russia. So why aren't we? There should be an equal investigation into who leaked Trump's tax returns. But no, you won't hear cries from that from the media. They're totally fine with it. The Democrats are totally fine with it. And again, my standard is I don't blame them. I didn't think it was immoral for Trump to accept, once we saw the dirt from the WikiLeaks, to say, look at this. I don't think it's illegal or immoral for the Democrats to do that with these tax returns. But that's not the standard the left has set, and they should be held to their own standard. Now, more to the point, the question of how this compares to Julian Assange. First off, let me say, I still put blame on Trump for this. Trump should have pardoned Assange, and he still should. What did Julian Assange do? He's a journalist. People came to him that were whistleblowers or hackers or whatever, gave him information that was true, and he published that information. Julian Assange did not personally hack anyone's emails. He did not direct people to personally hack anyone's emails. He merely published evidence that was brought to him. That's it. How is that any different than what the New York Times did? Now, we actually had Democrats, blue checkmark people on Twitter that have been saying for years they would pay people's fines if they hacked or if they obtained Trump's tax returns. We had people demanding, oh, we need by any means necessary to get these tax returns. So if your claim is, well, Julian Assange was dog whistling that he wanted people to hack the DNC, I've never seen that. But we certainly had people dog whistling that they wanted Trump's tax returns. Right? So even in that line of argument, they fail. Why isn't the New York Times in jail right now today? Why aren't they facing a lengthy prison term like Assange is? Now, the truth is, I don't want to see the New York Times. I think they're incredibly unethical. I think they should be sued for various other things. But if someone brought them information and they merely published it, I don't have a problem with that. What I do have a problem with is the left's double standard and people's double standard, particularly in journalism, that it's okay for the New York Times to do this, but not WikiLeaks. And why? What's the difference? Well, WikiLeaks harmed Hillary Clinton. It harmed the establishment. It pointed out incredibly shady things from both sides, both parties, in their warmongering efforts. Couldn't have that. So the propagandist in the media attacked a fellow journalist, Julian Assange, and said, oh, that was unethical what he did. And that's exactly what they do. How many illegally leaked information and stories has the media ran against Trump? Dozens? From illegal leaks that are coming out? Now these tax returns? Brian Stelter points out on Twitter, he says, well, actually, the person who leaked this to the New York Times, the New York Times claimed they had, quote, legal access to the forms. So, it's a distinction without matter. Who cares? For example, let's say that I'm your accountant. Better yet, let's do something I'm familiar with. I was involved in home health care. As a result, there are regulations called HIPAA regulations in the United States, which says that your medical information is private. I can't just run around saying, hey, you know, Bob Smith that I take care of, he has Alzheimer's. I can't do that. And that's, it can obviously get more impactful that he takes this amount of medication, blah, blah, blah. I'm not allowed to do that, right? By the way, there is no Bob Smith. That's a hypothetical. But you see what I'm saying. So if I have access to your medical documents, I legally have access to them, but I leak them to smear you, that's still illegal. Just because I legally had access, that's like saying, hey, your bank legally has access to your money, but if someone at your bank steals all your money, well, just because they legally had access to it, they still committed a crime. So what's Brian Stelter trying to do here? Gaslight people into thinking, oh, well, this is different. The person who released Trump's tax forms legally had the right to look at those forms. That's probably true. But they did not have the right to release them to the public. That's illegal. The same, so it's the exact same situation. The New York Times published what they knew were illegally documents that were, a crime was committed in the commission of the release of them. Just like the claim with WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. What's the difference? And the fact that the media would try to be like, oh, you remember this? Do you remember when, was it Brian Stelter? There was someone on CNN, I think, that said, they tried to make the claim, oh, you're not allowed to look at the WikiLeaks emails. You remember this? They said this. You have to come to us to look at them. Maybe it was Cuomo. You can't legally look at the WikiLeaks online. That's a crime. You have to come to CNN and have us tell you what they say. Wouldn't that be the same here? It's nonsense. Everybody knows it. And the story it actually, more than it enrages me about the tax returns, it enrages me about Julian Assange and why he's still looking at jail time. And Trump ought to do the right thing and pardon him immediately. And I don't care. I don't care if it was the Russians that hacked the DNC or if it was Seth Rich that released the information and gave it to Julian Assange. I don't care. As far as whether or not Assange should be in jail. He should not be. Period. I don't care if he comes out with information that hurts the Republicans or Trump. I don't care. I might say I don't like that information or I don't know if that information's credible. I would have to see it. But I'll say this. If someone just brought him info and he published it, he shouldn't be in jail for that. That's real journalism. Now, he should vet it and things like that, but you see what I'm saying. So I'm not saying, oh, release Assange because he said things that were critical of Hillary. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying release Assange because it's the right thing to do, and this situation proves it. Now, the other thing that's worth talking about, lastly, on this New York Times story is it debunks everything that they accused Trump of with his tax returns. I've been saying for years, there were two things that they wanted to, why this tax return story became noteworthy. One, they wanted to embarrass Trump because everybody knew that he had taken losses at some point, and they wanted to be like, Trump's not as good of a businessman as he says. It's stupid. Just because he took losses doesn't prove that he's not a good businessman. And I don't care anyways. His results speak for themselves in his current term. If you think Donald Trump did an excellent job in his first term, would it change your mind to know, oh, but as a businessman, he took losses some years? If you think Trump did a horrible job in his first term, does it change your mind or opinion of him to know that he took business losses? No. Why does it matter? Well, the reason is, one, they wanted to embarrass him, and second, they wanted to try to make the claim that if Trump had any connections in his tax returns to Russia, oh, that proves that he's a stooge of Putin. Never mind that by any objective, sorry about that, on Russia than any president. What would the story have been here? International businessman does business internationally? That's your big attack? Oh my God, Trump may have had business in Russia. And, well, Russia didn't like Hillary Clinton. Says who? We're now finding out that actually intelligence agencies were opposed to Brennan releasing that 17 agencies said that Russia was trying to help Trump. And actually there was good evidence that they may have preferred a Hillary Clinton presidency. But even still, who cares? Like, for example, let's talk about a hypothetical. Let's say Bloomberg would have won the nomination. You can't say Biden, right, or any of these other Democrats, because they've never actually created a business. All they've done is got wealthy being politicians. But let's say someone like Bloomberg, that before he was running for office was wealthy. Now, let's say that it turned out that the Chinese want the Democrats to win. I would say that's probably true. Now, if you found out then through Bloomberg's tax returns that Bloomberg, I assume he has business interests around the world. Simple. I would be defending Bloomberg. Now, if he was directly involved with the CCP and things like that, and it looked like it could have been influencing the election, maybe it's something worth looking at, but I'm more concerned with politicians having financial interest after they've been in office. You know, like Joe Biden's son receiving money from oligarchs in the Ukraine and China, that Joe Biden was tasked with being the point man to defeat those oligarchs, at least in the Ukraine. That's more interesting to me than if Joe Biden actually, imagine if, you can't imagine because Joe Biden's been a politician for 40 plus years, but imagine if before Joe Biden became a politician that he had business deals with Burisma in the Ukraine. That's fine. Now, if as an elected leader, he starts to give favorable treatment to Burisma, maybe that's worth looking into. But that's not what happened. So anyways, the whole story about Trump and Russians with his taxes was so dumb to me. Now we know that it was wrong. It was a lie. They got his tax returns. Where's the bombshell? You don't think if there was something in there, the New York Times wouldn't have reported it? Where is it? I didn't see it. I read the New York Times story. Aaron Matei called out Cenk Uygur for it, of the Young Turks, and said, hey, Cenk, you still, because that's been Cenk's claim all along. That's why the Mueller report didn't matter. That's why the FBI and Steele dossier, none of that mattered. All that mattered was Cenk knew that Trump was in league with Russian mobsters. He knew it. And that's where he'd received so much money, and his tax returns would prove it. So Aaron Matei was like, hey, Cenk, any response to this? And Cenk was like, well, the New York Times report shows that he had received loans. Those could have been from Russian mobsters. And Aaron Matei correctly points out, yeah, one of those loans went to Trump and NBC. So are we arguing that NBC is also tied into the Russian mob? It's just stupid. And it doesn't matter how many times these leftists get egg on their face. They make these absurd claims, it blows up in their face, they just move on to the next story, or they change it. I'm supposed to be doing a debate this week on Russia collusion. I don't know what the actual, the gist of the debate is this. I don't know what the wording will be, but the gist of it is this. Was the Russia collusion investigation a hoax? I don't like that wording. What I mean by that is it was designed by people in the Obama administration and high in the intel community to go after and remove Donald Trump. That's what it was. It wasn't a hoax. The investigation happened. But the crimes that were alleged never did, and they knew that they didn't occur, and they were, as FBI agent Barnett said, they basically were just fishing. Right? When I do that debate, I will guarantee you that my opponent will say this. Well, actually, if you look up the definition of collusion in the dictionary, it just means like working with someone and, you know, it doesn't have to be a crime. Collusion doesn't have to be a crime. So therefore, there was Russia collusion. So the same people that told us for 3 years, there's a crime, we need to investigate. Oh my God, Trump broke the law in working with Russia to steal the election. The same people that said that instantly, the moment that it was shown that wasn't the case, were like, well, technically there was still collusion and that's still bad. It's garbage. They're liars. That's it. That's going to happen this week. Go back to this video when it happens. I'll even say in the debate, I'll say, ha, I just did a video the other day saying this is what you would do. I know it. I know that's what will happen. Oh, Trump had shady business deals in Russia. No, he didn't. This document proves it. Well, but he didn't pay that much in taxes. Yeah, but it wasn't illegal. He didn't do it. Well, but still, he was a failed businessman. This is constantly what happens to the left. And Scott Adams talks about this a lot. Right? Like, you'll take a specific issue, they'll make a claim. Trump said to drink bleach. No, he didn't. Trump said that disinfectants could possibly help. Actually, that's true. There are medications that we consider disinfectants, including UV light, which is now being studied in Japan, which is a disinfectant that they're thinking might have some possible advantages to defeating the coronavirus. So actually what Trump said was true, and never once did he mention the word bleach, nor did he tell people to go out and drink it themselves. Well, yeah, but Trump shouldn't be giving medical advice. But that's not what you said. That's not what your argument was. Trump said Nazis were good people. No, he didn't. He specifically, in the comment that you're talking about, 2 sentences later, he specifically said, when I say good people, I'm not referring to the KKK or Nazis or racist groups. He literally said that. Well, but still, he said that there could be good people. But that's not what you said. This is constantly what they do. This is what the entire investigation into Trump was. They make some garbage allegation that gives them the excuse to tear his life apart and investigate him and everyone connected to him. And then when it turns out that the garbage allegation was garbage, even when we find out they knew it was garbage all along, they say, yeah, but we got Paul Manafort for failing to register as a foreign lobbyist, so, right? That wasn't the initial allegation. That has nothing to do with Trump. That was working with Hillary's campaign manager, illegally influencing politicians like Hillary in 2013, well before Trump was a politician. Yet that's and this is constantly what the left does. They just move from one thing to another. They make some absurd claim, and then next week, when you go back to your friend, and you're like, they'll say the same thing. Trump said to drink bleach. No, he didn't. We just had this conversation last week. They just skip on to something else and then act like you didn't show that they were wrong. Same is true of this. Now again, the big reason that we were told that we needed to see these tax returns was, did Trump have connections to Russia? Okay, now we know from these tax returns he did not. Any comments from the same people that are talking about this on Hunter Biden accepting $3.5 million from Russia? Anything? All the people that hyperventilated. Don Jr. could have got money from Russia. Trump could have built a tower in Russia and got money from Russians. Well, they didn't. Now we have definitive proof that Joe Biden's son did. And is there going to be an investigation? Anyone? Or how about this? Remember during Uranium One, when Bill Clinton personally met with Vladimir Putin, and then 2 weeks later was paid $500,000, personally paid $500,000 to give a speech at a Russian state-owned bank? Remember that? Oh, and then it just so happened that Hillary's team and Obama's team happened to sign off on sending uranium rights to the Russians. Remember that? Why isn't the media concerned about? So once more, what we see is the left is constantly talking about, hypothetically, Trump could do X and that would be horrible. But they themselves are doing X right now, not hypothetically. Hypothetically, Trump could have got dirt on Hillary from Russians and then used that against her. Meanwhile, the Democrats actually were colluding with Russia. And then the FBI was using that collusion to spy on Trump. But it would be terrible if Trump theoretically would do that. Trump theoretically could not have a peaceful transition of power. Meanwhile, the left literally didn't have a peaceful transition of power. And because they control culture in all these institutions, they get away with this crap. Now, I want to talk about this Hunter Biden story for a minute. It's worth talking about. Let me be quite clear. Look, if Hunter Biden was involved in buying prostitutes that were sexually trafficked, that's terrible, don't get me wrong. However, I don't have evidence that he knew that they were sex slaves or anything like that. I don't know. Right? I said the same thing with the Robert Kraft, and by the way, Robert Kraft owns the Patriots. I'm no fan of the Patriots, right? But it's like, you know, look, I'm not saying sleeping with hookers is good. I'm not saying that. Especially if you're married and you're cheating on someone. And I think that trafficking is a big deal. I really do. But that doesn't mean that the John knew everything about the person that they're sleeping with. So even with Hunter, I pull back a little on that. I do. And let me defend Hunter Biden in this sense a little more. I don't care if he was doing drugs. Don't care. And I actually care very little about whether or not he was receiving money. Hunter Biden's not the one I'm concerned with. Now, before people freak out and go, what? Let me explain. Hunter Biden's just a guy. My tax, he's just a guy. He's not someone who was voted for to represent this country. If Hunter Biden successfully used his father's name to get all sorts of money from shady people, fine. That's not what I'm concerned with. What I'm concerned with is Joe Biden. I'm concerned with, what did Joe Biden know? And it's clear that he knew what his son was doing. In fact, I did way back during the impeachment. I talked about the New York Times initially contacted Joe Biden, was like, what do you think about the fact that your son's working for Burisma? And his spokesperson issued a statement that was just like, oh, well, you know, it's all legitimate, blah, blah, blah. So then for Joe Biden to claim, I didn't know that was occurring, is a lie. Now, keep in mind, the reason this matters is Joe Biden and Obama had pointed Joe Biden publicly to be the face that was working with Ukraine to weed out corrupt pro-Russian oligarchs. That was Joe Biden's task as vice president in the Ukraine. That's why he was personally meeting President Poroshenko, because Joe Biden was the point man. We know that the Obama-Biden administration declared that Burisma and the person who operated it, Zlochevsky, was corrupt. So this would be the equivalent of, let's say that in your town that they appoint a drug task force, and the guy leading the drug task force says, you know, this guy over here, you know, we'll go with Bob Smith again. That seems to be good. Bob Smith is the head drug man here. We can't prove it yet, but we're going to get to it. We know that this guy's the head drug man bringing drugs into the town. And then the task force son works for Bob Smith and gets a bunch of shady money for doing nothing. You would be like, whoa, 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 wait, what? And then all of a sudden the drug task force guy's like, yeah, we're going to fire the prosecutor that's looking into my son and this head drug dealer. That's exactly what happened. Joe Biden was tasked with weeding out pro-Russian oligarchs that were corrupt in the Ukraine, and yet he willfully let and knew that his son was working for the very guy that he was tasked with going after. And then he happened to use $1 billion of your tax dollars to make sure the prosecutor, who also in the Ukraine was looking into this corrupt oligarch, was fired. That's incredible. I don't care if Hunter Biden was snorting coke with the millions of dollars he got. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is Joe Biden issuing a quid pro quo to fire a prosecutor who was looking into his son. What matters to me is Joe Biden was someone who had influence and voice on places like the CCP, the Chinese government, and dollars that we were sending to the CCP and policies that we were making involving China, while his son was getting billions of dollars from China. What bothers me is that Biden was claiming that Russia was this horrible mess and that anyone who has connections financially to Russia By the way, it's not YouTube censoring me. It's because I'm driving and I live in rural Pennsylvania. So, I don't think this is YouTube censoring me. So, anyways, we'll see. It might keep buffering. If so, I might have to shut down, but hopefully not. I'm getting closer to the city, so you'd imagine that the internet would be fine. Anyways, that's the problem. And again, I'm being consistent on this because I don't even think the fact, it's the double standards that's the problem, right? So, for example, I just got done telling you, if Trump had business deals in Russia, I don't think that proves that he did something illegal. It is not proof to me that Hunter Biden did something illegal by taking $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife. That's not proof of illegality, but what it shows is the hypocrisy of the left. If the entire Democrat Party and the entire mainstream media has been foaming at the mouth for 4 years that Trump or his family could have got money from Russian oligarchs, why wouldn't that then be an equal story when it occurs on the left? That's the problem I have. And then it's worse with Hunter and Joe Biden because we can see that quid pro quo was actually used to fire a prosecutor that was looking into his son. And actually having a business deal is one thing. Having a business deal with people that we know are accused of being oligarchs that were breaking the law is a different thing. So That's my feelings on this situation. And it just seems, and of course, you knew that this was, I said this. Always put the shoe on the other foot test. I said, okay, if this is what we're doing to Trump, way back when, Trump's son met with a Russian lawyer trying to get dirt on Hillary. Why was that a crime? Why was that even alleged to be a crime? For example, let's say that someone tells me, say I'm running for local office, and someone tells me, Rob, you got to meet this person. They got some information that you're going to want to hear about your opponent. And I go and I meet with that person. Why have I committed a crime? Let's say that this hypothetically happens. That person tells me, yeah, Rob, we stole your opponent's tax records, and it turns out that, they're receiving donations from big oil. Now, who's to say that I don't take that information, immediately go to the police and say, hey, I just talked to someone who admitted to me that they stole the tax returns of an American citizen. And they say, thank you very much. We'll investigate this. Why did I commit a crime? Well, how do we know that if this Russian lawyer wouldn't have told Don Jr., oh, we did a bunch of illegal things and found out Hillary Clinton was shady, that he wouldn't have immediately called the FBI and said, look, these people are hacking Hillary Clinton. We don't know. Why? Because it was all set up. But the act of meeting a Russian, why was this considered a crime? The act of taking money from Russians, I don't think that's evidence of a crime. It could be. Maybe it warrants looking into. But to me, it's not proof. I'm not convinced that Hunter Biden committed a crime by accepting $3.5 million from a Russian. I'm not. My problem is, media said, the Democrats said, oh, it's warrant investigation if someone received money from Russians, if they're connected to Trump. So why wouldn't it warrant investigation if they're connected to Biden? That's it. That's the problem. And you knew that the media would have a double standard. You knew they would. Just like the Me Too movement, for an example, right? Believe all women. Oh, what about this woman that accused Joe Biden? Nah, not her. That's the problem. It's the double standard. All right, so another story of hypocrisy that's going on is, so this New York Times story, it's huge. Project Veritas released through a whistleblower that was involved in politics in Julian Assange's district that she has been basically spearheading an effort to buy votes and ballot harvesting in Minneapolis. Is that where she's at? I think. This is devastating. It's corruption that you can't imagine. Now, let me say first with a few caveats. I think Project Veritas has overwhelmingly been good. I think that when you bring them up, it's one of those groups. It's like Tucker Carlson. You say something and the left just says, oh, Tucker Carlson, no, he's terrible. No, we don't believe him. That's what they do with Veritas. Veritas lied that one time. Did they? I don't like the fact that Veritas releases the clips edited as much as they are. I don't mind that they do for exposure, but I wish they would release the entire long form. I really do, so that we can judge for ourselves. But oftentimes you could, like, for example, when they did the video on Bernie supporters and you saw the Bernie supporters that worked in his campaign saying, yeah, we're going to put Trump supporters in re-education camps. They said that. There was no possible context that makes that okay. And the left just doesn't know how to, they don't want being exposed, their corruption being exposed. That's why they hate Veritas. But having said all that, I will be honest and I'll tell you, although I'll talk about this story and I think that there's enough smoke here that warrants an investigation, I can't definitively tell you that there's not an alternative explanation. I can't. And to be fair, I really am. So, maybe there's an explanation. Maybe this was falsely edited, but certainly there's enough smoke here for an investigation. So, for example, the first crime that you could see that's admitted to quite a councilman in Julian Assange's district and an ally of Julian Assange. And he's like, look, I have 300 ballots I received from my brother right here in my car. The numbers don't lie. This is called ballot harvesting. Ballot harvesting is so disgusting that even Democrat Tulsi Gabbard is proposing legislation to end it. It's the practice of sending paid political operatives to communities and picking up all of their ballots to turn in. Now, the problem with that is you can see how divisive, like, let's just say, let's put it this way. If you're in a left-leaning place, try to put a Trump sign in your yard. See what happens. You can see dozens of hours, if not more, of footage online of people smashing Trump supporter signs. I'm sure you could see it the other way. I think it'd be quite less, but you could theoretically have a Trump supporter smashing a Biden sign. I'm sure it's happened. So are we going to trust these people to hand in your ballot? If they're willing to destroy your personal property because they think that that sign could theoretically help someone that they don't want to see in office, would you trust them then to hand in your ballot? You would trust that? If you're watching and you're on the left, let me ask you this. You know that I'm a Trump supporter. I was offered a job with the Trump campaign. If I had received that job with the Trump campaign, would you have trusted me to come take your ballot and hand it in if you voted for Joe Biden? You would have trusted that? Now, I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't take anyone's ballot ever, even if it was legal. I wouldn't. That's not what I do. And I think that you should vote in person, or if you need to request an absentee ballot, that would be the second best way. But I am the type of person that if you told me, you hear this all the time, hey, everybody get in the car, we're all going to vote. What if I told 4 people that and they said, sure, we're all going to vote for Biden? Would I drive them? Yes, absolutely. I absolutely would. I'm not going to screw over your vote just because you're voting for the opposite person to me, no matter how heinous I find the person you're voting for. That's our system, and I respect that. So, but in general, if you're a Biden supporter, would you trust paid Trump supporters to turn in your ballot? I wouldn't trust it, in general. If they're willing to destroy your sign. But, hey, I'm sorry I smashed your Trump sign there, but go ahead, give me your ballot. I'll make sure it gets in. You gotta be kidding. That's what ballot harvesting is. And it's legal in some states like California. Well, am I right? The Atlanta Mars District's Minneapolis? I think that I'm right. Or Minnesota, I don't know. Whatever. In that state, I read, because I was interested in this, you're allowed to have 3 ballots. You're allowed to harvest 3 ballots. So let's say you went into a town and you were like, at a time, right? So, mom, dad, and daughter live there and they're all voting. You're like, hey, I could take your 3 ballots and turn them in. But no more than that. He's admitting on camera to having hundreds of ballots. That's a crime. That's illegal ballot harvesting. Then they go on to talk about far more shady things. For example, paying people for their votes, taking advantage of the elderly and taking their ballots and filling them out. It's truly despicable. Now, what do you think happens if they're able to, so picture this, in a place like that, if you're able to go into an elderly community, scoop up all the ballots and then fill them out for yourself, what do you think happens when 2 months before an election, we change the entire system of how we vote and send everyone a ballot? What do you think happens? You don't think that there's going to be opportunists that would be willing to scoop up ballots that they don't think are going to be used to fill them out? Remember, there are people out there right now, Democrat, I'm not talking about fringe people, I'm talking about blue checkmark media, Democratic politicians that are saying, if Trump holds a hearing on Amy Coney Barrett, they should burn down this system. Right? That's what they're saying. Burn down the system. Do you think people that are literally willing to light fires, attack people, destroy institutions, are beyond filling out some ballots corruptly? You think they're beyond that? Talking about the dangers of, oh, well, actually, there haven't been much problem with mail-in voting. Yes, because that's been done through an absentee system. I'm against the idea of universal ballots being sent out. I am. However, if you were going to do it, because it's such a change that not only could have corruption, but honestly, in addition to corruption, It could also just have people not understanding how to use these, particularly elderly people. And people that don't have as much of an education. There's some people that maybe struggle to read, and being in-person voting would be much simpler than the directions that comes with getting a mail-in ballot. If you were going to roll out a system like that, you would not do it in the 2 months before the most important election in our lifetime. You would make sure that you would probably roll it out in the midterm year, right? A year where there wasn't that many elections, and you would make sure that you were preparing for it for an entire year. You wouldn't do it 2 months before an election. And remember, they're doing this allegedly because of COVID, but the very experts that they tell us that we have to, of course, request an absentee ballot. No problem. I agree. Perhaps they should stay on the safe side and request an absentee ballot. That's the current system. That's vastly different than sending out universal ballots to everyone. This story shows exactly how corrupt it will be. Now, with Omar specifically, I've done videos that show that the evidence is overwhelming that she has lied about who she actually is, that her family committed fraud, that she probably married a sibling, and I don't care about, let me be quite clear, I'm not implying that she slept with her sibling, I don't care, I'm not getting into that stupid, I don't care. That's not what I'm suggesting. Nor am I suggesting, if this story was true, if her parents lied about who she was to get her in here, that's not her fault. If that was a kid, right? That's not her fault. However, the story that I reported on and that I did a video of months and months and months ago, it seems like a lifetime ago, showed that she intentionally lied in court documents. For example, she claimed that she hadn't seen this gentleman, her husband, in years, yet she posted evidence on Facebook showed her hanging out with him. That's lying on federal documents, which is a crime that held up to, I think, 5 years in jail. Certainly, that's warrants for an investigation. Yet, there is none. Let's see if there's an investigation on this scheme that we see cooked up now. But it's a big story, and it's going to be developing, and Trump actually tweeted that he wants to see an investigation of this, but I'm not so sure what legally, the story was kind of breaking as I woke up this morning, or last night when I was asleep, so I didn't get to look at it a lot, so I'm not sure the legal ramifications of exactly that's going on, such as, is the DOJ allowed to investigate this, or is this something that has to occur at the state level? I don't know about that stuff yet. So I'll be looking into that, but certainly there needs to be an investigation. I'm not saying that 100% this is proof, but the words that were being said, the admissions that were being said on that video are quite damning. And it's a serious, serious, serious allegation that warrants an investigation. This stuff occurs all the time, and I don't trust the FBI. I don't even trust the DOJ. They're liars. I mean, Chris Wray, the head of the FBI, was just telling us the other day, left-wing violence, what? White supremacy is the problem. There's no fraud. Didn't Chris Wray just say that the other day? Despite the fact that we can see people that have been convicted in the past year of voter fraud. There's no fraud, he says. And remember, anytime someone tells you, well, if there was fraud, what are we talking about? One person, 100 ballots, 200 ballots? Yes, that was with the old system. We basically sent out mail ballots that were let's say 1% of the ones we're going to send out this election. So if 1,000 votes were rigged in that 1%, multiply that times 100. That's 100,000. You don't think that could sway a state? And it could be way worse than that. So we've been lied to over and over by the experts. Oh, this stuff doesn't occur. Of course it's occurring. Now, in this particular situation, we'll have to see when more evidence comes out. What else to talk about? I guess we could talk about the Russia collusion stuff. I talked about this on my radio show the other day, but it's worth mentioning. I mean, if you want to make this story real simple, without even getting into the text messages that we had all these FBI agents that were talking about buying liability insurance, and they basically knew that it was a sham investigation into Flynn. I'm not even going to touch that for a second. That's bad enough. But let's just take the fact that we know that the FBI in 2009 was investigating Steele's primary subsource as a Russian spy who would damage the United States national security. I understand people out there that get bored with this story, and there's so many names, and what does it all mean? I get that. This is simple to understand, though. okay? So let me try my best. I'm always trying to just make this story simplified. Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid, through a law firm, Fusion GPS, paid a British spy to get dirt on Trump from Russians. They knew that that dirt was coming from Russians because Christopher Steele was giving it back to them, telling them. The allegation, and then without verifying that information, the FBI used it to spy on Trump's team. We now know that information was bogus. We even have admissions from Rod Rosenstein, who signed off on those warrants, who certainly is not a Trump fan, that had he known the truth, he would not have signed off on the wiretaps, on the FISA warrants. That's devastating. I don't know why that wasn't reported as a bombshell, because it is. We now know that the FBI knew, they at least suspected, let's be as fair as possible, they suspected that the very person whose word they were relying on to get a warrant against Trump's team, the very person they were relying on, they themselves suspected of being a Russian agent that was trying to damage the United States national security. Now, you might say, let's play devil's advocate. Let me play the other side, right? Actually, Rob, if you look at the documents, it says that the FBI closed their investigation into that person in 2010. That's true. But if you look, the reason they cited wasn't that they found him innocent. It was that he left the United States. So there was no need to see if this person was a Russian spy trying to harm the United States if he was no longer in the United States. So they never closed the investigation because it's like, oh, well, this guy's innocent. That's not what it was. We also know from the release documents that actually the FBI was, the current FBI, the Peter Strzok James Comey edition, was well aware of that investigation into Dichenko, Igor Dichenko, I think's his name, who was the primary subsource. They were well aware of the allegations that he was possibly damaging the United States national security. So what does all this mean? Hillary Clinton's team paid for dirt from a Russian spy, or an alleged Russian spy, who the FBI thought was trying to damage the United States. They then lied about paying for that dirt from that Russian spy for a year. The FBI admitted to knowing that person was an alleged Russian spy. They never verified that alleged Russian spy's claims, and yet they used them to spy on Donald Trump. And the reason they used it to spy on him and his team was alleging that Carter Page was a Russian spy. They went to a Russian spy to accept his claim that Trump's team was Russian spies. Do you see the insanity of this? Do you see how ridiculous that is? That would be like saying, it's hard to come up with an analogy that's more blatant than this. They're admitting that this Russian Dichenko in 2009, he's duplicitous, he's a liar, he's shady, he's operating with espionage, he's trying to harm the United States. And so when you're going to, and remember, what is the context here? We're not talking about, think about it this way. You might say, well, but Rob, wouldn't a Russian spy know who other Russian spies were? Well, if he was admitting he was a Russian spy in the first place, maybe that would be the case. But secondly, we're not talking about some situation that's a small issue. We're talking about the FBI knowing that they're going to be spying on a presidential campaign. The stakes for that should be so high, the threshold should be so high that it's a slam dunk. That you're like, if they wanted to spy on Trump's team, what they should have done was, they get this information and they're like, okay, this information's coming from someone we know we can't trust, but we're going to do our damnedest to verify everything he said. They did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. They took him at his word and didn't verify any of it. It's unbelievable. Imagine if Donald Trump pays through an intermediary a Chinese spy because they were harming the United States. Someone that we know does not have the best interest of the United States at heart. It's a spy for our enemy, China. And imagine that Trump's team pays an intermediary, this Chinese spy, who says, yeah, actually Joe Biden's a Chinese spy. And then Trump proceeds to spy on Biden's campaign and leak information to the press and appoint special counsels and raid his lawyers in the middle of the night and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You think the media and the Democrats would be okay with that? You think that'd be okay? The entire allegation, when they look at people, like when you hear them, and again, this will come up in this Russia debate I do, they'll be saying, but what about when Manafort meant Konstantin Klimanik? What about when he meant Deripaska? These are shady Russians. People connected to, they shared polling data. They shared polling data with shady Russians. Oh my goodness. Polling data with shady Russians. Yep. Dude, the FBI was uncritically accepting claims from a known Russian spy to spy on Trump. They weren't just sharing polling data. That's outrageous. And I understand this Russia story is complicated, but once you see this, then you understand everything. This was a coup against the president. It's not just the coup, though. Remember when thousands of intelligence officials signed on to Bill Barr being terrible? You remember when the entirety of the media downplayed it and said there was no corruption in the FBI and you were hurting the country if you wanted to look into it? You remember that? When supposed professional journalists like Woodward, they have nothing to say about this corruption? This isn't just a few bad apples. This is the system. There are thousands of them involved. You're telling me that the thousands of former intel agencies that criticized Bill Barr, they can't see the evidence that me and you are seeing? They can't see it? They didn't say word one. Those thousands of people, they didn't speak up and say, oh my God. The FBI was so duplicitous that even the acting director, Rod Rosenstein, who signed off on, admitted he would have never signed off on warrants to spy on a president. He would have never signed off on them had he known the truth. Where are the intelligence officials? The retired ones. Sorry, I'm going to lose you for a second. Maybe not. We'll see. Looks like I might lose you for a second, though. Where are all the people that said Trump talking to the Ukrainian president? Oh my God, that's impeachable. Where are they now? The FBI talking to spies from Russia, taking unverified dirt that we now know to not be true to spy on Trump. No problem. None. Where are they? You think if the thousands of intelligence officials and media people and foreign policy experts, if they were all willing to engage in this coup, or at least deflect for it, you don't think that State Department officials wouldn't do the same? Like the ones we saw testify against Trump at the impeachment trial? People like Yovanovitch, that we now know that her desk in Ukraine, who was appointed by Obama, ambassador to the Ukraine under Obama, we now know that they were spying on conservative journalists like Dan Bongino, John Solomon. We now know that actually everything they accused Trump of, they actually did, the quid pro quo and all that stuff. You don't think that if you could see these thousands of intel officials and the FBI agents and media people that were willing to do the Russia coup, you don't think the State Department would have done it with the Ukraine business? You don't think that the health experts that are out there saying, oh, you can spread COVID if you go to work or go to church, but not if you go to a Black Lives Matter rally, you don't think that they would be interested in the same thing? We had thousands of health care officials Or experts, alleged experts say, oh yeah, COVID's bad, but white supremacy's worse. So go ahead, go out there and spread COVID by the hundreds of thousands. You don't think they're willing to do that? To engage, to harm Donald Trump? You trust the media is going to accurately portray that? No other issue matters. Because what this shows, what this coup shows is, one, your vote doesn't matter, your voice doesn't matter. Unelected officials in the deep state and oligarchs and all of these groups that we talk about all the time, they're the ones that control the show. And second, if thousands of them were involved and willing to lie to you about this, what else can you trust them on? You trust them on climate change? You trust them on the fact that Antifa violence, even COVID? Why would you? Remember, we're not talking about 2 or 3 bad apples. We're talking about not one whistleblower came out from the FBI. We see their text messages saying, wow, this is incredibly shady. Where were the whistleblowers? None. Where was the media investigating them? The vast majority of the mainstream media, not there. You have people like John Solomon, Catherine Heritage, Sarah Carter. That's it. Thousands. Like, as always, it wasn't that, oh, there was a coup against Trump. They don't care about that. They care that, oh my God, it's so unethical that Bill Barr's investigating the coup against Trump. So they don't care about the actual coup. They're just furious that it's being investigated. Thousands of former intel officials sign off that they don't like what Bill Barr's doing. You trust them when it comes to voter security? Trust Chris Wray? Why would you? You trust them when they say we need to bomb Syria? Why would you? If hundreds of people in your town, right, let's say that the police in your town, right, they rob you blind. They steal all of your stuff, your local police. And everybody in the town's like, well, how dare you accuse the police? And you're like, I got it on video, like, here they are. And they're like, no, you're immoral, you're unethical. We all think you're terrible for wanting this investigated. Would you then trust your town when they later tell you, oh, and by the way, you're gonna need to move your shed because, you know, it's an environmental hazard? Wouldn't you be like, wait a second, you guys were all against me with this obvious corruption that happened to me last week, so why am I gonna just take your word on this different issue this week? But that's what we do. Oh, well, you know, the Russia thing, it's complicated, you know, well, whatever. Yeah, what about COVID? We gotta trust them on COVID. What, the same experts that are telling you that somehow the disease is so smart, it knows not to infect people at Black Lives Matter rallies? Oh, forget about that. What about, you know, what about the white supremacists that are rioting? Those aren't white supremacists, that's Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Hey, okay, whatever. What about Trump's taxes? What, that were illegally leaked and it was hypocritical? Oh, yeah, okay, whatever. What about Trump said to drink bleach? On and on and on. Climate change, now that's the next thing, right? As I said it would be. If they declared state of emergency over a virus that might kill you all and shut down the economy and take away your rights, they're certainly going to be able to do it as soon as the Democrats get power. The first thing they'll do is say, oh, climate change is an even bigger threat to humanity than the virus, so we need to lock down even more. And we'll take it. People will accept it. Oh, yeah. And then you'll be like, but wait a minute. You said, so I can't drive my car and I have to be locked down and I can't go to work because of climate change, but here's Nancy Pelosi flying on a private jet. Yeah, so what? Deal with it. And people will. They'll say, oh, okay. And the police that you're defending right now against the violent communist thugs and Black Lives Matter, the police that we're all defending, they'll come arrest you for not wearing your mask properly or, you know, wanting to go to a ball game or sing some hymns, and they'll arrest you. That's where we are. Why? Because of this coup. Or rather, not because of the coup, though that's a big part of it, but because of the system that allowed this coup to occur. And if Barr and Durham would ever arrest the people that we could blatantly see were involved in this coup, then maybe you could start waking normal people up to, you see, this argument that we just have to trust the experts, sometimes the experts are out to screw you over. And when they lie to you over and over and actively harm you, maybe you shouldn't just trust them without proof. But as always, it's like I'm fighting an uphill battle. You can't get is that going to be the story today? I mean, think about it. If George W. Bush's administration had done this to an incoming Obama administration, this would be the biggest political story in the history of the world. But because it happened to Trump, everyone's fine with it. Again, I wrote October 26, 2017, if unverified opposition research was used to spy on a presidential campaign, it was the biggest political scandal in the history of this country. Now we know that it was so much more than that. During Mueller's testimony, I immediately, the first video I did during Mueller's testimony was saying, wait a minute, if the scope of Mueller's investigation was supposed to be the number one thing that was written on the scope memo from Rod Rosenstein was investigate Russian interference, we know that the most effective Russian interference was the Kremlin official that was the source of the Steele dossier. I was saying this years ago. So why did Mueller investigate that? Now we know that not only did they know he was Russian, they knew that he was actively being investigated as a Russian spy trying to harm U.S. national security. So think about this. Let's assume Bob Mueller's a stand-up guy, right? Okay, he gets brought in. They're like, we need you to come in for two things. One, we need you to investigate Russian interference. Second, we need you to make sure that no one connected to Trump was involved in this. Got it. What's the two? There were two examples of Russian interference that Bob Mueller investigated in his report. You know what they were? The first was the alleged hack of the DNC, which they provided no proof at all. That was the first. But let's say that even that was true. For the sake of argument. Okay. That's as effectual as illegally releasing Trump's tax returns. Right? The allegation wasn't that what Russia hacked and leaked was untrue. That was an attack on our system. So would it also be an attack if someone at the IRS or someone connected to Trump illegally released his tax returns? Sorry about that again. So that was one, the hack. Let's assume it was true. Okay, Russians hacked. The second was Russian trolls on Facebook and Pokemon Go. Something that was taken so serious by Mueller, he basically dedicates half of his initial part A of his report discussing. They charged 12 trolls and then had to release the charges because a judge told them, you have zero proof that these people were operating at the behest of the Russian government. They had none. Limitless resources and money by Bob Mueller, 3 years of investigation, and one of the central arguments that they made immediately dispelled. They couldn't prove that the 12 Russians were working for the Russian government. In other words, that would be like saying, I live in the United States, right? Let's say that I take a particular interest in an election in France, right? And I start posting memes about Macron, and they're lies. Can you imagine then the French government not just arresting me, but alleging that the government of the United States interfered in their election? Why? I'm just some random guy. Where's the proof that I was working as behalf of the government? But if you're Russian, then we automatically assume you must be working for Putin. That's what the left does. Then they call you racist. They call you xenophobic. They're the ones that assume anyone with a Russian-sounding name must be a tool of Vladimir Putin. Unless they're working with, Biden, Hunter Biden, or the Clinton Foundation, or Christopher Steele, then they're good Russians, right? It's such nonsense. So they couldn't prove that. So that was the two allegations. Easily, the biggest example. How impactful was the DNC leaks? Sorry about that. Jeez. Stoplight beat me up there. How impactful was it? I don't know. But I'll tell you what was more impactful. Did you know the last polling I saw on this was a Gallup poll, I think, like 5 months ago? Over 50% of Democrats still believe that Trump is his tool of Putin and still believe the allegations in the Steele dossier, even after Mueller disproved them. Over 50%. Now, if Russia's goal was to interfere and cause division in this country, can you give me a better example than that? This Russian interference was so impactful that it caused the FBI to spy on Trump. It was the reason that the FBI spied on Trump's team. There is no bigger example of Russian interference. Now, we know that Mueller, at the time, even when he started his investigation, not only knew that Christopher Steele's source was a Kremlin official, but also knew that the FBI investigated that Kremlin official as far back as 2009 for trying to damage national security. So can you point to me the line in the Mueller report where he discusses that Russian interference? The biggest Russian interference. Remember, that was his primary task, to investigate all Russian interference. Show me in the report where he talks about Russian interference in the form of the Kremlin official that was the author of the allegations in the Steele dossier. It's not there. Imagine that you're an investigator, and you're brought into a company because $100,000 got stolen, like Walmart, right? You're an investigator, and they're like, someone from Walmart corporate calls you up and says, we want you to go in because there's been allegations of theft from this Walmart store, and we want you to investigate all of the thefts that have occurred. Okay, so you go in, and there was one incident where $100,000 were stolen, but then there were 3 other incidents where $100 were stolen. And your entire report is, we're getting to the bottom of the $300 that was stolen. But what about the $100,000? Yeah, we didn't talk about that. If you're tasked with investigating something, why wouldn't you, at the bare minimum, at least spend some time talking about the biggest example of it? Is it a coincidence? I'm gonna set this up better. Is it a coincidence that every single time we see that there's foreign interference that helped Hillary Clinton, somehow none of the investigators thought it was a big deal? Every single time. Oh, foreign interference, that's bad. What about in the Ukraine? Nah, we don't care. What about the foreign interference in Russia that helped Hillary? No, we don't care. Isn't that odd? Just coincidence, I'm assuming, right? Surely, just coincidence. Even when it's the biggest and most blatant example of foreign interference. So I called this out immediately. I investigate the biggest example of Russian interference. That's inexcusable. And no one seemed to care. Now we know even more. This was a coup. Now, I understand. I don't use a lot of the internet jargon, red pill, black pill, all that stuff. But I think that some people would consider me a black pill because I am skeptical about what's being done and anyone will really face justice over this. I'm skeptical. I'm not saying I'm definitively sure, but I know this. Why would we wait so long to charge people until right before the election? What if they're not charged before the election and Trump loses? Then what? All the people that told me, oh, Rob, you need to calm down. Durham and Barr are going to get to the bottom of this. Maybe they will. I don't know. But what if they don't? Then what? Oh, well, the crimes, they got away with them. Oh, well, I'm sure they'll get better now, right? I talked about this in the radio show yesterday. You remember in 2008, let me say what I'm talking about. So hear these people say all the time, do you remember, oh man, let me think of his name. His wife's name's Victoria Tensing, and his name is, I can't think of his name right now. His image is right in my face, and or my mind, and I can't, whatever. But I remember a year ago hearing him say, well, actually, and he's one of Trump's staunchest allies, this lawyer, and he said, we probably won't see many criminal indictments, but the important thing is to get this knowledge out to the public. Is it? So let me give you an example of that. You remember in 2008 when we had a financial crisis and then the knowledge came out to the public that one of the big causes of that was you had all these banks that were giving mortgages out that they knew would never be repaid, then lying and saying that those were AAA mortgages. Yes, that's exactly it. I can never pronounce his last name. Joe DeGenova, or DeGenova. Right, but the bank said, they were telling everyone, these mortgages are AAA, and then your retirement account, your 401k would invest in these because you invest in them assuming, they lent the money out, but it'll gradually be repaid over the next 30 years. Well, banks knew that this would never occur, and so all of these banking agencies lied to people, which resulted in an economic collapse. How many people went to jail over that? 0. Now, do you think that's going to happen again? Do you think it's already happening? I do. Because here's a little lesson that you don't have to be a genius to know. If there are no consequences for bad behavior will continue. Like, let's look at Portland. Riots every night. Never any consequences. So do the riots stop? No. The riots will not stop until there are consequences. If you think that, well, as long as people know the FBI engaged in a coup, so we don't have to arrest anyone. If you think that now all of a sudden they'll never do something like this again, are you kidding me? It makes it 10 times more likely. Because then the lesson is, oh, well, okay, we can do what we want, even if our crimes are made public. Trying to unseat a duly elected president. The evidence clear as day in public for everyone to see, and none of us are held accountable. In fact, instead, we all got book deals and deals on the media, and we're considered heroes by, all the celebrities and stuff in this country. Why wouldn't they do it again? What's your incentive not to? What they should have done was charged Comey and Clapper and Brennan and all the others with crimes that they could easily have found out years ago. I've done a video. One of these days I'm going to reshoot this video. I went through all of them and showed how they all lied to Congress, and we could prove it. Remember, the Inspector General recommended Comey for criminal prosecution, and it was Barr that declined for releasing classified information. I proved that Comey lied in his testimony to Congress. I proved that Brennan lied in his testimony to Congress. I proved that Clapper lied in his testimony to Congress. Why weren't they charged? And I was told by people, well, because there's bigger crimes coming down the pipe. So, then charge them for those bigger crimes when they occur. Hey, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Now, if the American people knew, my God, the very people right now that are out there writing books and telling us how dangerous Trump is and how horrible he is and how criminal he is, those very people themselves are under arrest for engaging in a coup against the United States, maybe that would help Trump win the election a little. Now, that's not the reason they should have done this, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying only arrest these people because it helps Trump. I'm saying arrest these people because it's justice and because that lets the American people know, oh, there was all sorts of corruption going on at the higher echelons of this system. Instead, what they're going to do is push it off until after the election, and then if the Democrats steal the election, it'll just all be buried. That seems like a hell of a risk when you're talking about a coup against the United States. Hell, let's say it's a coin flip. Who wins, Biden or Trump? You're really willing to put the fate of people that engaged in a coup against this country and whether or not they face any criminal prosecution, you're really willing to chance that in a coin flip? When we could have arrested them months ago? Yes, I understand. Durham's investigation was still going. But again, we had them for crimes that they committed. Now we're getting to the point where it's like, well, according Maria Baratoma, who I actually really like, I think is a good journalist, her sources, and her sources have been good, are now saying there will be no charges or no further releases of damning information before the election because they're afraid it'll have the appearance of swaying the election. So the Democrats can continue The Democrats can continue to engage in a coup against Trump. They can impeach him for looking into their crimes. They can do whatever they want during an election year, whenever they want, and that's perfectly fine. But you're not allowed to release evidence of criminal actions by them and the investigators and the intelligence agencies. That's the argument. What a great deal the Democrats have there, the establishment has, right? We can be corrupt as we want to you going into an election, and you're not allowed to talk about it because our corruption before the election is perfectly fine. But you pointing out the corruption that could influence. Thank you. Thanks for everyone who's watching. It's hard for me to read the chats because I'm driving. By the way, I'm close to my work, so I'll be ending here soon. But I really appreciate it. And I do apologize. I know the quality of these videos in the road aren't the best because, the buffering and things like that. But it actually helps me, gets me pumped up for work, and that gets me on the move. So I really appreciate everyone who listens. But despite all this, a coup against Trump, even if let's do the best possible, let's say you don't think it's a coup. Let's say Jake Tapper and you're like, okay, I'm looking at this. I don't think this is evidence of a coup, but it's certainly newsworthy. You just elect to not cover. Instead, your main story going to be international businessman. You went on breathlessly about Trump or his family maybe accepting money from Russians. Yet when we find out proof that actually Joe Biden's son did accept money from Russians, you don't have a word to say about it. And the terrible thing is, like my buddy Drone Tech did a debate here the other day, which you can check out on his channel. One of the first topics of the debate was, is the mainstream media biased against Trump? And the bulk of that panel said, I don't see proof of that. That's where we're at. Intel, the very people, the most powerful investigative agencies in the world, engaged in a coup against Trump. The supposed media that's so important, the fourth estate, to tell people, what's really going on, covering up the coup. And people so indoctrinated that they can't hit basic truths. You really don't see evidence that the media is biased against Trump. You don't see that. That's what these people are claiming. They don't see evidence that Antifa or Black Lives Matter is engaging in violence. They don't see it. How can you take these people seriously? Oh boy, wouldn't you know it? No parking spaces. Oh wait, maybe. It's funny. So this is like, I've been up to the office for some trainings before here. I'm doing life insurance. Everyone's got a way nicer car than me. Ooh. And actually I'm driving my wife's car, which is nicer than my car. So, all right, I'll be wrapping up here. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. So my schedule this week, I'm not sure when I'll be doing stuff. Allegedly, tomorrow night, I'm going to be on Let's Be Frank's channel discussing the Russia stuff. Though I got to get in touch with him because if the debate occurs tomorrow, maybe I'll do something with the debate. I'm also supposed to be doing a debate with my friend Drone Tech against two people on whether or not the Russia collusion stuff was a hoax or whatever, as I discussed in this debate. And so we'll see if that's occurring. And then some other stuff that I was going to do here at some point this week. So normally my schedule now, if I'm doing videos, you'll probably catch them mostly around 8 p.m. So and YouTube's not going to give you a recommendation. They're not. These road videos, I can only figure out how to stream on YouTube, but I would prefer, if you'd like to support me, try to follow me on DLive. I'm Normal America on DLive TV. So dlive.tv/Normal America. You can follow me there. It's free if you're not on DLive. The reason I like it is YouTube censors me, they demonetize me, they shadow ban me and do all this stuff. DLive doesn't do any of that. I'm also on Twitch, Normal America with Rob Noor on Twitch, but I'll be broadcasting to all of those and YouTube, and it'll usually be 8 o'clock. You will not get a notification. You will not. YouTube will not give you a notification about me. So if you're bored, just check around 8 o'clock. If I'm streaming that night, it will be at 8 o'clock. And last thing, I got 2 weeks of training here, and then I'm going to have a set schedule. Once I have that set schedule, I'm going to be asking people in my audience, what are the best days for me to live stream? What are the best times to do that? So I'll be asking for your all's help in that. The last thing is I appreciate all financial donations. Thank you so much, Paul. As always, you're great. Anyone that wants to donate, I really welcome them. If you want to help in other ways, there's 2 things you can do. 1, like and subscribe. Recommend my videos to other people. And second, if you need life insurance, get in touch with me. Put a comment after this video in the chat, and I'll get in touch with you because I sell life insurance now. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Stay safe. As always,